All right, so at the dinner table, let's not talk about politics, okay? Okay, we're probably not going to talk about religion. We'll keep that out of it. What else are we not going to talk about? Oh, we'll not talk about money. Yet across the country, parents are giving large sums of money to their adult kids because it's the way to help them get into the housing market. But there are some pitfalls. Laura Paris is an associate lawyer at Shulman Partners LLP, joins us this afternoon. Good afternoon, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
Not so bad. So we've added gift sums to religion and politics about things not to talk about at the dinner table, right?
Well, I mean, you might not want to talk about it at the dinner table, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that needs to be discussed. Especially nowadays when we're looking at housing prices, you know, in Toronto, GTA, they've skyrocketed. And unfortunately, I don't think our incomes have increased in the same manner. And as a result, you're finding that, millennials entering into long-term relationships right now are requiring assistance from their parents if they want to enter into the real estate market. And I think not enough people quite understand what the implications of providing your child with that sort of, one-up leg start to getting into the market, what the implications are if that child ends up sharing that home with someone who's going to be considered a spouse.
Stunning amounts of money coming out of a report from CIBC indicating that gifting was over $10 billion in the past year. That is that strikes me as a very high number.
It is a pretty striking number, but again, it's not surprising. I mean, it's when you're looking at what prices are in order to get into the market at this time, it's quite difficult, and you are seeing that not a lot of kids are able to make or have these endeavors on their own, and they are leaning on their parents, who have been able to build up a certain amount of wealth and perhaps intended to give their children that money one way or another when they passed by way of inheritance, that they're kind of giving them these early advances now to allow them to get again that kickstart to life and get into the real estate market.
So these situations can take the form of a gift or a loan, and those two things are very different in some ways. At least in terms of a gift, you don't have to worry about paying it back. Is it really necessary to have a lawyer to figure out the loan on this?
Well, it's important, especially when you're dealing with a loan that's between non-arm's length parties, that you do have those formalities in place so that there's no question at a later date as to whether or not it was intended to be a true loan. What you often see when parents do loan out money in this way is that it's not something that comes with any sort of interest payments, and it's something that could technically be repaid just on demand. And not a lot of parents actually end up invoking the terms of that loan. And in those circumstances, it creates some confusion or some question, I should say, with respect to whether or not that loan is actually a legitimate loan or was simply something that was written in that way to try and shelter that money. So this is why, you want to enter into either a cohabitation agreement or a prenuptial agreement, or as we call it in Canada, a marriage contract, so that there's no question as to whether or not these funds are intended to be gifted or loaned, and whether or not these funds are intended to be shared with your child's partner.
Well, and that's where the really interesting questions come in, because you could loan it to a child who has a partner at this point, and you need to structure that so you know who's getting what out of this deal. And then you could loan it to a child who doesn't have a partner, and 6 months later they have one. A lot of complicating factors.
Exactly. And I think, all too much people are of the, mistaken belief that as long as there's some sort of paper trail associated with it, that, there'll be some outlet and some way to recover those funds. A lot of people look at relationships and, division of assets from a perspective of equity. And while, when we're talking about married couples and we're talking about the equalization scheme, it is based on, a matter of trying trying to divide assets in a way that both parties are leaving that relationship on the same footing. What a lot of people don't appreciate, especially when you're talking about married couples, is that there is a specific designation that's applied to a matrimonial home. And with a matrimonial home, if money was put into that property, that was intended to be a gift or a loan, that you're now complicating issues, and that money could be lost in that matrimonial home, even if it was something that you had coming into the relationship. On the other side, if you're talking about a non-married couple and common law relationships, again, a lot of people are of the belief, well, it's in my name, so it belongs to me, but that's not necessarily the case. And I think what people need to appreciate is that even if someone may not be successful with a claim at the end of the day, the availability of that claim exists. And if you are going to subject yourself to that in the future, it could become quite complicated, especially depending on the length of the relationship, as records may not be available. So planning for this in advance and entering into these contracts at the beginning of a relationship or before the relationship becomes, very serious is important, because you're going to eventually save yourself from having to answer to these questions in the event the relationship breaks down.
Well, and that's just another on the list of uncomfortable topics to talk about, Laura, to me, is you've got a kid who is in some kind of domestic partnership, be that a marriage or a common law relationship. Nobody likes to talk about the possibility of it breaking up.
Definitely not. And the way that I try to look at this and explain to clients or friends or, whomever I'm speaking to when it comes to these contracts, when you're entering into a relationship, is to look at it almost as if it's an insurance policy. We don't get insurance because we want to get into a car accident or we want our house to burn down. We do it as just in case, to save us from having to spend exorbitant fees in the event something does backfire and does go wrong. And I look at a prenuptial agreement or a cohabitation agreement in the exact same way. It's simply you trying to protect yourself in the event something does go south. And again, I mean, something like this, it's going to eventually be beneficial to both parties, especially when these types of issues are issues that are open to discretion. Having an agreement that specifically sets out exactly how you want things to be divided at the end of a relationship is ultimately going to save everybody money, time, and emotions at the end of the road in the event the relationship does break down.
We keep moving towards this paperless society, Laura, but that's not your advice. Let's document everything, right? Let's know what has been said and what's been agreed to, even if it is a gift and it's a verbal agreement.
Absolutely. And again, especially when you're talking about these things with non-arm's length parties, like with your parents, I mean, parents do often gift their children money. And if that money has been gifted and there wasn't an intention to have it loaned back, that's when you start to get into these complications. And again, taking those extra steps to make sure that you have that adequate paper trail, that you've taken the appropriate steps. If it's truly intended to be a loan, that you're actually treating it that way is important. And again, if you're not taking those steps in terms of kind of formalizing those agreements between you and your parents, then make sure you're formalizing that between you and your spouse.
It looks like we're going to see more and more of this kind of discussion down the road, Laura. I don't think this market is changing.
No, and I think as well you're seeing these conversations come up a lot more nowadays, whether it be by virtue of parents giving children money to start their life, or even people getting married later in life and just simply having accumulated more assets that they want to protect. And I think that's kind of where things have been shifting when we see relationships, that people aren't getting married at a time in their life where they have nothing and they're just starting out. You're seeing that people are getting married later in life or entering into these permanent or long-term relationships later in life where they have more to protect. So I think the conversation about these cohabitation agreements and marriage contracts is a very important conversation, and one that we are going to see coming up a lot more often, because there just simply is more. People are coming into relationships with more under their belt, and that's a reason to have this conversation.
Laura, thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much.
Laura Paris is an associate lawyer at Shulman Partners LLP. The recent report from the CIBC said 30% of Canadians received help from their families in 2020. The average gift for first-time home buyers rose to $82,000 in 2020. That compared to $52,000 in 2015. And in the first 3 quarters of 2021, no surprise here, we can all say it together, leading the way were Vancouver and Toronto. Toronto, the average gift was about $130,000. In Vancouver, the average gift was about $180,000. And overall, gifting amounted to just over $10 billion across the country.